under the second test from 1888 Materials, page 701. She's dealing with Anna Phillips, false prophet. Several times during our conversation, in which you became very much in earnest, you repeated the sentence, "O consistency, thou art a jewel." I repeat the same with decided force to you. You say that Anna visions place the forming of the image of the beast after probation closes. Brothers and sisters, there's only one definition of the image of the beast in inspiration. The image of the beast is the combination of church and state with the church in control of the relationship. She expresses it a variety of ways, but there's only one definition of the image of the beast in inspiration, and the image of the beast is the combination of church and state with the church in control of the situation. The mark of the beast is the mark of Rome's authority. It's closely related to the image of the beast, but it's different. Okay, the image of the beast is the combination of church and state with the church in control of the relationship. I repeat, you say that Anna visions place the formation of the image of the beast after probation closes. Or you could say, you say that Anna's visions teach that church and state come together after probation closes, because the combination of church and state is the image of the beast. You say that Anna visions place the forming of the image of the beast after probation closes. This is not so. You claim to believe the testimonies. Let them set you right on this point. The Lord has shown me clearly that the image of the beast will be formed before probation closes. When does probation close? At the Sunday law. The image of the beast will be formed before probation closes, for it is the great test for the people of God by which their eternal destiny will be decided. There's a test that comes before the Sunday law, which is the great test for the people of God by which their eternal destiny will be decided, and that test is the test concerning the image of the beast. If this is the Sunday law where the door closes, where do we get the close of the door as an illustration of the close of probation? On the rule of first mention in the Bible, where do we get the closing of a door as an illustration of the close of probation? Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark is illustrating where the door closes, because all these histories are the same, all right? Noah's Ark is the door closing on the ark is the third test in his generation. But there's a visual test that precedes the third test. The third test is where the door closes. The second test is a visual test. It's something that demands that you see what's happening. You need to see that church and state are coming together, because it's telling you as a Seventh-day Adventist, your probation is about to close. So in Noah's Ark, the door closes at the third test. Was probation still open when the animals were getting on the ark? They had a visual warning, didn't they? And we have a visual warning too. And our visual warning is to recognize that the image of the beast is coming together in the United States. The United Nations is the dragon. Testimonies to Ministers, page 38. Sister White says, kings, governors, and rulers have taken upon themselves the brand of Antichrist and are represented as the dragon who goes forth to make war with the saints. The dragon power at the end of the world is a group of politicians, kings, governors, and rulers. And the group of politicians at the end of the world that is the civil authority is the one world government that we know as the United Nations. But the second test, which is less familiar to Adventists, is a visual test that takes place before the door closes. Sister White says, the Lord has shown me clearly that the image of the beast will be formed before probation closes, for it is the great test for the people of God by which their eternal destiny will be decided. This is the test they must pass before they are sealed. The image of the beast test is the test, the second test that comes before the door closes at the third test of the Sunday law. And the first test says, one thing is certain. I'm on page 12 under the first test. One thing is certain. Those Seventh-day Adventists who take their stand under Satan's banner will first. Where do Seventh-day Adventists take their stand under Satan's banner? At the Sunday law. One thing is certain. Those Seventh-day Adventists at the end of the world that receive the mark of the beast, that take their stand under Satan's banner, they will first give up their confidence in the testimonies of God's Spirit. And in the terminology of Ellen White, that means the first test for Adventism is the spirit of prophecy.
A flood of anti-doctrine and non-biblical teaching and rejection of the spirit of prophecy and and rejection of the spirit of prophecy, and
we have the guidelines. We have the spirit of prophecy. We know what is right. And if people reject the spirit of prophecy, they have a serious problem, but it's their problem.
And in the terminology of Ellen White, that means the first test for Adventism is the spirit of prophecy. And it's the way it always is. Each of these movements. There's a human being that is a reformer, whether it's Noah or Moses or Elijah or John the Baptist or William Miller. The reformer for us at the end of the world is Ellen White. And if we reject Ellen White, brothers and sisters, if you want to understand how church and state come together in the United States, you can. You could figure it out from the Bible. But as a Seventh-day Adventist, you know full well that there's much more light about how church and state comes together in the United States in the writings of Ellen White. So if you're down here in this time period as a Seventh-day Adventist determining whether you agree with the spirit of prophecy or not, and you decide that you don't have any regard for the spirit of prophecy, you just flunk the first test. You just throw away your intellectual point of reference to recognize the second test. So the third test takes you totally by surprise, and we're going to show in a minute, Lord willing, that these tests are progressive in nature, and if you flunk the first test, you're not involved with the second, and on and on. And the first test for Seventh-day Adventists is the authority of the spirit of prophecy. You know, in the last General Conference session that they passed a resolution when no one was around, don't you? You know what it says? The first page praises Sister White, and the last paragraph says, but her writings are not supposed to be, are not to be used in, and this is their words, faith or practice. What does that mean? That's a resolution in the last General Conference session. I'm not guessing. I have it. I've printed it in a newsletter. Nobody really paid attention to it. But what does it mean that we can't use the spirit of prophecy in regards to faith and practice? What does that mean? It means, brothers and sisters, I think we're making a wrong choice here on our first test. What does Sister White say? The last deception of Satan is to what? Make of none effect. The spirit of prophecy. You realize you're at the end of the world? I realize I'm at the end of the world. So the last deception of Satan should be here, right? Brothers and sisters, I know that the majority of Seventh-day Adventists that hear what I'm sharing about prophecy, they'll end up trying to figure out how to expose me as a heretic or this, that, or the other. They're not going to receive this message. I understand that. I've been doing this a long time. And invariably, when I say something like I just said, those type of listeners are going to say, he's criticizing the church, he's attacking the leadership, and all this, that, and the other. I'm really not. I'm opening up the prophetic word. To be forewarned is to be prepared. We're walking in the footsteps of ancient Israel. And God's people did not receive the message then. And that history is being repeated. And we need to be wise, not foolish virgins. Notice Desire of Ages 799. It is the voice of Christ that speaks through patriarchs and prophets from the days of Adam even to the closing scenes of time. That means it was the voice of Christ that was speaking through the writings of Sister White. And it has the same authority as the writings of the Bible. In ancient times, God spoke to men by the mouth of prophets and apostles. In these days, He speaks to them by the testimonies of His Spirit. In these days, He speaks to them through the spirit of prophecy. But she goes on. There was never a time when God instructed His people more earnestly than He instructs them now concerning His will and the course He would have them pursue. But she's putting an emphasis on her writings that you don't get away with putting that kind of emphasis on her writings in Adventism anymore. She's saying her writings are conveying the most earnest message from Christ to His people of all time. Wow. 3 tests. And we were given a work to do immediately after the disappointment. Proclaim the third angel's message. But we went into a Laodicean condition. we've went fishing like the disciples. All right. So in Isaiah, and we're saying that when Isaiah 28 says, with a stammering tongues and another lip shall he teach to this people, we're saying that in each of these histories what's illustrated is that the men that the Lord ordained to finish the work, they never do. Did the Sanhedrin get involved with the work during the time period of Christ? They never do. Was William Miller a theologian, or was he a farmer? They never do. And Sister White said over and over again in the last work, the Lord's going to call men from the common walks of life to finish the work. It's always the same. So when Isaiah says, with a stammering lip and another tongue will the Lord speak to this people, it's consistent with all these reform movements. Those that are ordained to do the work, and I know I get in trouble for saying this, those that are ordained to do the work, they're always managing the corporation instead of paying attention to the unfolding prophetic light. And that's my point. The first phrase there is, whom shall he teach knowledge? And the reason that's important is because in every reform movement, there is an increase of knowledge. And the wise will understand that increase of knowledge, but the wicked don't understand it. And in Hosea 4:6, Hosea is speaking about the end of the world too. Hosea 4:6 says, my people are destroyed from a lack of knowledge. So when Isaiah says, whom shall he teach knowledge? This is a life or death question. Okay? This knowledge is what tests every generation. The increase of knowledge tests them. So when Paul in Hebrew 5, back to the top of the page, when he says, for when the time you ought to be teachers, and Paul's speaking about the end of the world like any other prophet, at the end of the world, when you're supposed to be wise, when you're supposed to be a teacher, you have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracle God, and are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat. Is this true? At the end of the world, is the Seventh-day Adventist Church sleeping in a Laodicean condition? Yes, you can say that with authority, because in every reform movement, before you get to the fourth and final waymark, God's people have quit doing the work. They're asleep. They're supposed to be teachers, but they're babes. You have to start all over with them. You have to teach them the milk of God's Word. But it's in the third decree that Artaxerxes provides the legal pronouncement that the Jews can pass judgment on civil problems and religious problems, even to death. They could punish someone that broke a civil law up to death and a religious law up to death, and it's marking that their national sovereignty has been returned to them. This is the logic for starting the 2300 days on the third decree. This is when it's legally and fully restored as a nation. It can now punish its own criminals, civil and religious, but what it means is that they're able to judge their criminals. Judgment has been returned to them. And then you'll see in your quotes on page 7, 2 places where Sister White says, after the third decree, Ezra was disappointed, lining up with the disappointment of the Millerites after October 22nd, 1844. They still had the work to do, which was to finish the streets and the walls, even in troublous times, but they quit doing the work. You remember the story. Just like Adventism quit doing the work that was given to them shortly after 1844. You can say that without being critical of the church, because Bible prophecy teaches it over and over and over again. It's just the fact of the matter that before the fourth angel accomplishes its work, God's people have to be revived. They're Laodiceans. They need to be awakened. They need to receive the Laodicean message. And you see this illustrated in the 3 decrees. And then on the top of page 8, you will see that when, and this board's too short, that when Nehemiah is finally going to finish the work, he secures the 4th decree in that history, prefiguring the 4th angel's message.